Hello, and welcome to Language, Culture, and Dr. Lou. Today I wanted to talk in this video about a lot of famous quotes from history that have been misinterpreted by taking them out of context because, well, we learn a lot of what we know about history and society, how things have been in the past by these famous quotes that we hear from around. And so sometimes the problem is when these quotes are repeated for so long, they end up getting taken out of context. So sometimes the original meaning of what the person who originally said this thing meant, what they meant ends up being lost because we don't have a context for it. So today I want to take about half a dozen of these famous quotes from history and provide a little context and some facts to let you know what the person who said this quote originally meant and where it goes. And the first one is a very, very famous quote, let them eat cake, right? And this is supposed to be have said by Marie Antoinette. She was the Queen of France when the French Revolution started in 1789. And then it was, off with their heads and down with the king and all that. And so she was the wife of King Louis the 16th. And this quote in the original French is Qu'il mange de la brioche, which actually technically means let them eat brioche rather than let them eat cake because, well, brioche is a very sweet, very buttery bread. It's more like bread than it is like cake, but still, it would be a luxury that peasants cannot afford if they're already starving because they're too impoverished to be able to even afford their daily bread. It would be silly um, for a queen to react like this in response to a question in 1789 about what are the people going through. And her reply would be, qu'ils mangent de la brioche, let them eat brioche or let them eat cake. Yeah, that seems appropriate for the time in history, but the thing that's been misinterpreted about this quote is I don't have any beef with the fact that the quote is about let them eat brioche rather than let them eat cake, because interpreting that into English, more or less, same point is it's silly to say that. So she's out of touch by saying that, um, because of course they can't afford brioche either. Just like they couldn't afford cake either if they can't afford bread. And the thing that's been so misinterpreted about this statement is that this is misattributed to Marie Antoinette because, according to historians, there's no evidence that she ever said these words. Really, where these words do come from, qu'il mange de la brioche, is from Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau wrote an autobiographical work of fiction about his own life through 1865. And one of the characters in this book is an ideal princess. He didn't name her exactly. She's just la princesse idéale. And so she's the one who said qu'il mange de la brioche. And by the way, since this book was about his life through 1865, it's impossible that Marie Antoinette would have been the one to have said those words because in 1865 she was only 9 years old and had never even been to France yet. She would not become queen for a long time after that, and so it's not that's not even a thing. She did not say those words. The words from a very talented writer. And then after her death, the saying was attributed to her for, I do believe, political reasons. And so, fact is, these words did exist but they were in the writings of Rousseau, and they were not words out of Marie Antoinette's mouth. So that's the big misinterpretation about this quote. And so I just wanted to give you that one fact to start this with. Now, the second saying is also from a piece of literature, actually, one that I'm sure all English speakers know. This is, of course, a work of William Shakespeare called Romeo and Juliet. And it's the tragedy, of course, of two star-crossed lovers. And why are they star-crossed? Because their families are feuding with each other. Juliet is a Capulet, and Romeo is a Montague. And so their last names are what is keeping them apart, as well as their first names, because if you notice in the play Romeo and Juliet, all of the Capulets, all of Juliet and her relatives, they all have first names that end with a T or other consonant. So Juliet, Tybalt, for example, they're Capulets. Now Romeo, because he's a Montague, his name ends in O, like Mercutio, for instance. And so it's their names that are keeping them apart a lot of ways. It's this family feud between their families. And so the line that gets misinterpreted is, "Oh, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" And the misinterpretation here is that people interpret the word wherefore to be an early English version of the word where, as if she's asking, "Oh, Romeo, where are you, Romeo?" The truth is, in Shakespeare's day, the word wherefore was used to mean why. So what she's saying is, "Why are you Romeo?" is in, why does your name have to be Romeo? And this is very much clarified by the very next sentence out of her mouth. Her very next words are, "Deny thy father and refuse thy name." So when she says, "Wherefore art thou Romeo?" she's not asking where he is at all. She's asking, "Why do you gotta be named Romeo?" And she further goes on with the same argument when she says, "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet," right? What's in a name? Anyway, so that's what that whole line is about. So in short, wherefore means why. And there he goes. So that now you have the full context on that quote. And so the third quote I wanted to talk about, also from a piece of literature, there's a poem called The Road Not Taken, written by Robert Frost in the early 20th century. And these are the misinterpreted quote out of here is the last three lines of this poem. The last three lines read, "Two roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one last traveled by." And that has made all the difference. So people interpret this to be some sort of um, encouragement and for can-do individualism, really saying, "Oh, do your own thing, go off the beaten path because it makes all the difference." But that's really not what he meant by this. And how you do know that's not why he meant by this is because earlier lines in the poem very much muddle this message a lot. The truth is that Robert Frost was worried about people misinterpreting this poem because he said, in his own words, it's very tricky. And he warned us that the two roads are, in his own words again, really about the same and that they're equally traveled. The thing is, the narrator in this poem doesn't know that one is just as traveled as the other, because he's only one person all alone in the woods. So how would he know where anybody else has gone by? And the paths are also described is more or less the same. So there was no real difference. And so this is not an encouragement to do your own thing. It's more like a commentary on self-deception, on how much we deceive ourselves when we're constructing our own life story, as if all the choices that we ever made really made the difference and really mattered. And he's also, in a way, saying, don't cry about what never was, in a way. And so really it's about he admits that the poem is very tricky. And I admit that it's tricky too, because it ends with, and that has made all the difference. But really, to me, that's ironic, that statement. It's sarcastic, maybe even, because really he's describing these two roads as really about the same in the poem itself earlier. And so it's the narrator who's deluded into thinking that it made all the difference that he went one particular way as opposed to the other. So that's it. That poem, again, The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. It's not a salute to can do individualism. It's a commentary on the self-deception that we practice when we're telling the story of our own lives. And so, yeah, not so uplifting after all. And so the next quote is, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And so this quote is, it seems to be encouraging, right? To work very hard to get where you can go. And if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you're persevering and working so hard, and it's going to work out for you. But that's not really what this quote originally meant and where it came from. Um, Problem is that the original quote, why I don't want people to misinterpret this is because it makes for terrible advice to somebody else. Please don't tell anybody else that they should pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, because it might be very insulting, because the insulting words are in the meaning, are in the expression itself, because physics tell us that it's physically impossible to actually pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, like you can see in the illustrations here, and that's why the one on the bottom left there. Um, so as well, inequality is actually promoted by expecting every people to, despite their impossible circumstances, to be able to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. Where this expression originally comes from is in 1834 or 35 or something like that. There was an inventor named Nimrod Murphy. And yes, that's true. His first name was Nimrod, uh, last name Murphy. And so he claimed to have invented a perpetual motion machine. And critics thought this was completely impossible. So one writer decided to call him out for this blatant lie. Excuse me. Um, and how he did that was he was a writer for the Woodstock Mercury. And about when he was writing his article about this Nimrod Murphy's supposed invention of a perpetual motion machine, he said something to the effect of, oh, and perhaps Mr. Murphy managed to deliver himself over the Cumberland River, or possibly pull himself over a barnyard fence by the straps of his own boots. So that was our sarcastic statement, calling the guy a liar, saying your invention is a fraud, you're a liar. And so that's where the expression pull yourself up from your own bootstraps comes from. It's because it's not even possible to pull yourself up from your own bootstraps. It can be encouraging to recognize that somebody as having pulled themselves up from their own bootstraps if you want to recognize them for their hard work and all that. But I would really warn against using this as a piece of advice because it's could be pretty insulting to somebody who feels like they're trapped by circumstances well beyond their control. Anyway, so next one is money is the root of all evil. And if you don't know where this comes from, is actually from the Bible. It's a quote from the Bible, from the book of Timothy 6:10. Um, and how we take this quote out of context, money is the root of all evil, is we forget the three words that came right before the word money in that scripture. So when we take out the words that come before, that leads us to believe that money itself is inherently evil. That's not what the quote says. The three words before are the love of. So the whole entire quote, the love of money is the root of all evil. So this is telling us that greed, human greed, is the cause of evil. The humans' greed will make them maybe commit evil acts. It's not that money itself is intrinsically evil, it's don't commit the sin of greed. So that's what the quote is about. And so, yeah, money itself, this quote is not calling money itself inherently evil because please do remember the three words that come first. The love of money is the root of all evil. So that's really a statement about greed. So there you go. And one of my favorite quotes from history, I found out also has been somewhat misinterpreted. And well-behaved women rarely make history. I love that quote. The reason why Marilyn Monroe there is because this quote is often misattributed to her. This quote didn't even come from her. The quotation came from an article that was written after she had passed away, actually, after Marilyn Monroe had passed away. And so well-behaved women rarely make history. That quote was from an article, a 1976 article, a journal article about Puritan women written by, what was her name? Laurel Thatcher Ulrich. And that's why I included the rest of the quote in the little red highlighted section at the bottom of the black and white picture. And by the way, the black and white picture, that's Rosa Parks sitting in the front seat of this bus. And so this quote, well-behaved women rarely make history, is often posted right next to pictures of women like Rosa Parks or other big disruptors who helped progress move forward. And so with this quote, when taken out of context, it seems like, a very rebellious quote where we're really behaving women to misbehave, to behave badly. But that's not what this quote was originally about. It was, again, the article was about Puritan women, like matrons in the Puritan movement. And so what the author wrote was well-behaved women rarely make history against antinomians and witches. These pious matrons have very little chance at all. And her point in the article, if you read the article, her point is that the well-behaved women in history they also made contributions, and their stories deserve to be told as well. That was more the point of the story, is that even the women who were not misbehaving, even their stories deserve to be told because many of them had been very important to progress in history after all. And so there you go. Thank you for everybody who watches my videos to the very end. I hope some of these facts clarified some of these issues for you. And yeah, so please don't be afraid to hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. And so yeah, I will catch you around next time. And so see you later. Bye-bye.